Creating alliances, partnerships between ITADs and recyclers for maximizing profitability. And you guys have a world-class group on stage here who can really speak to this topic. This is going to be a fun one. Adam Shine is going to be moderating the panel. So what I'll do is I'll introduce Adam, he'll introduce himself, and then each of the panelists will introduce themselves and their backgrounds, and we'll go ahead and kick this off. So let's please give them your attention. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Nice to see everybody. Hope the meeting's going well so far. Today we're going to talk about partnerships between ITADs and recyclers. This session is brought to you by ISRI. For those of you that don't know ISRI, it's the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries. We have a booth. I would suggest that you stop by because we talk all things ITAD and recycling. And all of the members up here are ISRI members, so feel free to talk to us afterwards. We got a great session today. We're going to talk about, really why ITADs and recyclers need to coexist, some of the ways that you can profit from working together, some of the ways that you can form relationships that can benefit both parties. We got an excellent panel here. I have each of your introductions. How about you introduce yourself, though? We'll start with you, Chris. Oh, I think you're off.
Hello. There you go. Thanks, Adam. Chris York with Evterra Recycling. I'm the VP of Business Development. I've been in the recycling industry for about 12 years now. I've worked for companies like URT, Sims, as well as MRM, which is a manufacturing group focused on extended producer responsibility programs. Happy to be on the panel. Look forward to working out alliances and partnerships with ITAD companies.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Ray?
So it's on?
Yep.
There it is. I'm glad I'm up here with these guys because I've never been referred to as excellent so many times in the first couple of minutes of a presentation. So I'm glad to be up here with this group. I actually have 20 plus years of experience in the recycling industry. I've worked for contract manufacturers, small regional recycling companies, as well as large multinational companies. So good background, but in the end, it's all about relationships, and that's what I'm up here for, to talk about relationships and how those play a part in every aspect of bringing companies together and helping everybody really profit and work together to come to a common goal.
Thanks very much, Ray. Mike?
Mike Schuler, Veterans Alliance Resourcing, founder, president, CEO. A little bit of background, we're in R2V3 just east of Austin. Myself and my partner both been in the industry since 1981, so we've been doing this a long time. He's been processing material for all that time. I've been selling material all that time. So I've worked up and down the life cycle from the reverse logistics side on product returns. I've worked on trade-ins. I've worked on ITAD. The only thing I haven't done is recycling. so I bring the ITAD perspective here.
When I met Mike and I heard 1981, that was the earliest adopter I had heard of in this industry. Pretty impressive. So a little bit more about myself. I talked about ISRI, of course, but my name's Adam Shine. I'm the president at Sun King. We're an electronics recycling company and ITAD company out of New York, Buffalo, Rochester, and Utica. And interesting fun fact is that I've worked with all of the gentlemen here on stage in some form or fashion. I also come from a background of metals recycling as well. My brother and I are partners in a metal recycling company as well. And I find it very interesting because I grew up around the metals business. But one of the things that I find in the metals business is that people keep things close to the vest. They don't share information. They don't talk about, relationships, partners. And in the e-scrap business, which is one of the first sort of focuses of mine when I got into the business, I find it totally different. People are willing to share, learn from one another. There's not really a lot of competition. We have competition, of course, but we find ways to work together and coexist, and that's one of the things I'm really drawn to. So this session is really going to focus on how ITADs and recyclers can coexist and why they need each other. So with that, I've got some pre-prepared questions here, though. I would like audience participation, so if people have questions, please feel free to raise your hand. But to start, I'm going to throw something out to each of you and talk about a little bit about what this session's what the session means to you, and whether you consider yourself an ITAD or a recycler, and give maybe a personal example of a partnership that you formed that was mutually beneficial to both parties. Chris, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so Evterra, we're a scrap recycler, so low to mid-grade, that's all we focus on. So we found some great synergies with ITAD companies by being singular focused with the scrap. So they keep all the good stuff, they send all the scrap to us, we process it for them. Being R2V3 helps a lot with that because it's simple downstream processing for that, or simple downstream documentation for that. But yeah, I mean, just talking with Mike earlier today, I mean, we have some great ideas on partnerships on how to work together. Him sending me scrap, me, sending him some of the good stuff, get an idea from him what to be looking for that has that value, because we can then pass that value on to our customers.
Very good. Ray?
Yeah, so URT, Universal Recycling Technology, also a recycler. We are eSteward certified and in the process of becoming R2 V3 certified, which we should be done in September. For the question that Adam asked and partnerships, I'm going to go back to my previous employer and just talk about, from a manufacturing side, there are relationships that each of you probably have with manufacturing companies, OEMs, because one of the key words and big phrases that people are using right now is circular economy, right? And how do you close that circle? There's in my opinion, a big misconception that circularity is recycling, and that's a small piece of it, small piece of the puzzle. And the manufacturers are looking for ways to satisfy their OEMs, and the OEMs are looking for ways to satisfy the consumer. And the consumer is looking for ways that they can buy more green products and more products that have been recycled. So it is a closed loop, and being on the manufacturing side of that, we're looking for recyclers to provide post-consumer plastics, steel, all the metals, and really putting those metals and those plastics and those commodities directly back into play in the manufacturing side. So there's some very good opportunities there. You just have to be willing to work and look for those opportunities and reach out to those companies when you have those specific commodities.
Thanks, Ray. Mike, what about you?
Mike Schuler, Veterans Alliance Resourcing again. We are an R2V3 operation, but the idea of partnership is something that's not novel to us. Myself and my partner have been doing it our entire career, utilizing the secondary market to provide solutions. I give you a little bit of background. I launched the first trade-in program with Apple, did the first remanufacturing and shared revenue program with Compaq. This is going back to well before, back in the 80s, the 90s, first project where we were the sole source part supplier for, if you bought a computer with Best Buy or Sears back in the 90s, we were supplying all the parts using the secondary market to supply all those parts. We shipped over 1 million parts a year for a company I work for called Service Electronics. So the secondary market has been my lifeblood, and partnering is simply just understanding the dynamic of how to work with others to provide the benefits of what we bring to the table. And the secondary market, particularly in this phase, in the ITAD phase and the recycling phase, is another area of opportunity where recyclers that don't have a well-cultivated remarketing channel could leverage that to work with ITAD companies that have been focused on cultivating resale channels for used material. And that's what we bring to the table.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so just to give my own flavor too, Sun King really started as a reseller, refurbisher, and over time we grew and we got involved in EPR laws and started to handle much more recycling. But for us as a company, it's great to be able to go out to banks and healthcare and various different retailers and other things and be able to take not only the good, but take the bad too, right? So a lot of ITADs are out there looking for good value, but are they providing enough services to their supplier to take some of the lesser wanted materials and be able to process those in a safe and environmentally responsible manner. So that's why a lot of ITADs, they might not have the recycling infrastructure, but they can work with companies like ours and others. And on the reverse side, there's a lot of recyclers that don't have refurbishing and resale figured out necessarily, and they can potentially be losing value on assets that they have coming in their door. So to work with an ITAD to say, hey, I've got these units, is this something you're interested in? They can find that they can create more margin by going the ITAD route with some of their material. So next question, Chris, is specific to you. How do e-scrap recyclers and ITAD companies coexist? I think I just touched on it a little bit, but from your perspective.
Yeah, we coexist because we each do one thing really well, right? And that's where we're coming from on the scrap side, is we do scrap really well. We've really closed that loop on our downstreams to where our parent company is a secondary smelter, and then now we were just acquired by Korea Zinc, which is a primary smelter. So we have the precious metal loop completely closed now. So we're processing it, Igneo smelts it into a concentrate, and then it goes to the refining process at Korea Zinc. So that's an opportunity to work with the ITAD companies that they can push to their customers, knowing that those downstreams are closed loop. If you're working with a manufacturer, I mean, theoretically, they can go get the gold that they need for manufacturing. So I think, trying to do both is challenging, because if we were to do ITAD as well as scrap, we would be fighting, each side would be fighting each other, right? Do I take it to the shredder? Do I resell it? Where's the real value at? So it'd be a constant internal battle. And right now, we don't want to fight that fight. So we're going to do the scrap processing really well, better than everybody, and utilize partnerships and alliances in order for the resale side to still bring additional value.
And I will say something you guys are particularly good at is processing lower grade materials, which is really something quite different from the others that are out there that all want the high-end boards and different things. Mike, for you, in partnering with an ITAD company, can it be done on a transactional basis? Do you need to have a contract with a statement of work, and should there be certain minimums? How do you typically structure an agreement with a recycler and ITAD company?
It really varies. We certainly do transactional engagements. If a client's got, or even an end user has lots of material, they'll give it to us and we'll value it same day typically. We keep track of what the market's at for all material. We publish a price guide of what every I-Series product is going for laptops and PCs to our partners. We'll do a lot of statement of work, MSA, RFP response, particularly when we're working with MSPs, managed service providers that want an ITAD partner. They're displacing the equipment as they're selling new equipment, and we're in a great position to handle the buyback or the return profile. Now we're doing the same thing with recyclers, where we're formally engaging as the ITAD partner. We did a deal last summer for 11,000 computers for a client, and unfortunately that material turned out to be C grade, which a lot of ITAD guys struggle with to sell whole. We were fortunate in that our channel's been cultivated over decades, so I've got about 2,500 folks that we work with around the world, so we were able to get $1 million for that material. And those partnerships have now formed into formal relationships where we are the white hat, integrated ITAD partner for that organization. And we're now doing that with a number of recyclers that, instead of investing in the infrastructure or the hiring people that know and cultivate channels, which sometimes takes years, we can actually bolt on immediately and not only do a transactional support, but do it on a long-term basis where we are the ITAD for them.
Yeah, and the great thing there, again, is it's a win-win, because these recyclers are getting more margin than they otherwise would have gotten if they had just recycled those assets. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look in this space, there's been a lot of acquisitions over the last 20 years in this space because we're a target. We provide a service that is perceived to be of value, both at the top end from companies that are selling new equipment that need the total life cycle management side, and they want to be able to integrate an ITAD component, as well as with recyclers that can find extra value that's above and beyond the scrap value or the parts harvesting value. And That example that I gave you about the 11,000 computers, the parts value was only $36. We were able to get them $86 to sell whole units, even though the equipment was pretty beat up. But that's an example of a well-cultivated ITAD channel, and it takes years to cultivate that, and it's not easy to do right out of the gate. So it's so much better if you find each other's strength and you work with that strength as a partnership.
Yeah, and I would also say, too, that, you know, our being in New York, for example, for Sun King, our reach is only so far. So by creating partnerships, even with other recyclers or other ITADs, even though we have the capabilities, it allows us to work. We might have a customer with headquarters in New York, but they might have a facility in Houston or California, and we can tap into our network to still service them. So it's critically important to partner, and again, one of the reasons I love the e-scrap business. Ray, for you, how do ITAD providers ensure that their downstreams are not gaming their audits?
That's a good question. So all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the audit process and the certifications that we have available for our industry. There are, unfortunately, some games that go on, and, you know, the question was gaming the system. There are some games that go on, right? There is the possibility, and probably the thing that I would highlight the most is there's a possibility that if you send your scrap to a company that has a certification and you think they're CRT monitored, I'm just going to use CRT monitors as an example. You can pick your product. You think they're going to a downstream that's been audited and been vetted, but in reality, a lot of those companies could be using a URT or an Evterra that are doing the right thing with their products. And so they send us a load, or they send us 2 loads a year, and in reality, 10, 12 loads are going to downstreams that you're not aware of. And that is a concern in our industry. That is something that we are at URT at least looking to help overcome. But that's something that, from an ITAD perspective, if you are using a downstream companies, you really should open the hood and look at the engine and see where is that product really going. Where is all of that product really going? Yep. And is it truly going to the downstreams that they claim on their audit paperwork, or are only a few loads going there and most of the loads are going out the back door? And so that's what I claim to be gaming the system, gaming the audit system. And hopefully we can close that up, but at the same time, it's up to each one of us to make sure that our products are going to where a viable downstream, I should say.
Yeah, very good, Ray. Definitely important to check out downstreams and make sure stuff is going where your downstream says it's going. It's critically important. Mike, what do you think are some important considerations people should consider in selecting an ITAD?
Certainly certification. It's pretty foundational. Experience, channel. We are big believers in challenging the channel to see how good your recovery values are. If you're not able to, demonstrate that you can capture more value, what value to bring to the table as an ITAD. You don't have to look far back in our industry to look at organizations that cobbled together multiple entities, spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet lost those hundreds of millions of dollars because they didn't keep a good control on their costing of how they apply cost to their customers or how they remarket material. At the end of the day, if you've got $1 million worth of material and your net recovery is $80,000, something's wrong. And unfortunately, that happens a lot in our industry. Fees dominate. When it comes to settlement, it's all about the net recovery. And we focus on net recovery. Our clients, we give them very open reports on what we do, what our recovery values are, and we're constantly adding people to our channel. That's why we have thousands of people that we sell to. It's the only way to be an arbiter of making sure you're getting the top value. If you lock in and you've only got 20 customers you're selling to, I can guarantee you we can outperform that with an organization like us. We're constantly challenging our own channel because they won't win if they don't bid higher, straight up.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I guess continuing with that discussion or thought, what are you seeing right now as far as the markets are concerned? I mean, how do you protect yourself as an ITAD when you're locking in prices to ensure that between buying and selling, you're not taking a loss? Right now, obviously, things being...
As I said, we publish a quarterly price schedule that we actually buy against. In general rule of thumb is that the material goes within 10% of that number invariably. At the beginning of the quarter, it goes a little higher. End of the quarter, it goes a little lower. It's about a 3.5% decline per month. Last quarter was the first time I've had to adjust our price schedule multiple times. Had to adjust it 5 times last quarter. That just doesn't happen. Historically, we might adjust it once in a quarter beyond the initial publication. Prices fell off the roof, absolutely fell off a cliff last quarter. So how we protect ourselves, we make sure we're on top of valuation. We actively track our own sales, of course. I'm tracking competitors' numbers all the time. And we mitigate our risk. At the end of the day, if we're going to buy something, you're going to get a lower recovery than if you do a shared revenue. If you do a shared revenue, our risk is mitigated, but you're going to get a higher recovery percentage.
Very good, thank you. Chris, what's the benefit of an ITAD company working with an e-scrap recycler instead of processing the units themselves?
Yeah, I think they get more value that way, right? So instead of them utilizing their labor and having the processes to fully recycle the material, we're doing that for them, right? So from Evterra's standpoint, we're locating ourselves across the country to be the workhorse for the ITAD companies, right? So we want to be the guys that you call on when you have scrap, when you need pickups done in the regional areas that we're in. We want to be the go-to for that, right? Whether it's a simple server deinstallation, or it's, hey, I've got a customer that, has got a pallet worth of stuff, go pick it up for us, that sort of thing. We can sort things for you. We can ship stuff back to you if you have specific requirements. It's easy to do that. But let us focus on the scrap piece, right? We've invested in the facilities, the people, and the technology in order to be the best at it.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something important there, especially right now. If you're an ITAD and you don't have the wherewithal or the knowledge of recycling, right now especially is not the time to get into that with the labor market being what it is. We had a session earlier on company culture and how difficult it is to keep employees happy and how it's costing us more. And with that and, the rise in inflation and fuel costs and the reduction in commodities, right now, if you don't have the recycling infrastructure, you turn to a company like Evterra or URT who has those capabilities. It's something where you can, again, provide an all-in-one solution for your supplier and ultimately send it to a responsible party who's going to recycle it the right way. So back to you, Mike, for a second. How important from a relationship perspective between ITADs and recyclers is the geography and logistics in selecting a partner?
Certainly in our case, we have global partnerships. I've got an ITAD operation that we work with. That's a very large organization out of Europe, Asia, Canada. We've got support in India, Mexico, Australia, and so forth. In the domestic market, geography plays to some extent when you're doing takeouts, decommissioning. But frankly, logistics being what they are, bringing to a central location like Texas, it's not that much difference versus shipping intrastate. So at the end of the day, we're able to handle things pretty competitively against anybody that's got a geographic positioning anywhere in the U.S. Where we find the need is actually external in the international markets. And we've got clients that have hundreds of thousands of assets that we have to get processed and get sold by certified organizations. And we handle the sale, but we have to get it processed. So that's where our partnerships come in. And we vetted them. Fortunately, I've got a partner that's ran the largest processing and repair operation in the world. He ran Radio Shack for 25 years, running their service operation, did 10 million repairs a year. So he knows more about processing than anything. So he's established a lot of relationships globally, and we've been able to leverage that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Ray, Tell me some of the top one or two things as an ITAD company, what they can do to maximize scrap value.
Yeah, so that's a good question. That's probably what everybody's here looking for, right? Is most of you in here are ITAD companies and can maximize the value of the assets, but the product that you have that you're not going to resell, what kind of things can you do to really maximize the value there? And, depending on what products you're handling, but obviously, if you are going to dismantle it in-house, which I wouldn't recommend if you're an ITAD company, you can maximize that value, like Chris said, by sending it to a recycler that knows what they're doing and has, can shred that, as opposed to manually parting that piece out, assuming you've harvested any parts that you can resell off of it. Why dismantle the whole thing? Why wouldn't you just send it to a company that could shred it, that has an automated system to sort out the boards and the plastic and the steel and whatever else is in there? Don't overhandle material. Every time you touch something, obviously you're putting cost into that. You're putting labor into that, which is hard to find. You're putting more cost into that. So have possibly your lines, if you're not already doing that, separate scrap from ITAD right away and move that material out the door and get it off your floor space, recover that value as fast as possible, because right now commodities don't look like they're headed in the right direction. So if you're sitting on material, I would advise against that right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. Churn and burn. And again, for ITADs that partner with recycling companies, you obviously have to look for some information from them to provide you, what sort of categories you need to sort into and what types of materials you need to separate. Definitely rely on them to sort of help you create the most value for yourself in terms of the recyclables. Mike, going back to certification, you touched on it a little bit earlier. What are some of the advantages of engaging with R2, R2V3, or eSteward certified partner for ITAD or recycling, and are there any disadvantages?
Certainly from what we've seen, the R2V3 structure allows us to immediately engage with another R2V3. We don't have to have the extra downstream vendor paperwork. We don't have to have any of that as a requirement. So we search out, for our downstream side, we search out the R2V3 side. Just makes it easier, much more convenient. From a standpoint of negative, at the end of the day, certifications and all this stuff, it costs money for any organization that wants to do it right. It costs you money to get into that process. We came out of the gate without any certifications. We're a fairly new company, so we had to go through that whole process of getting all the paperwork, getting all the infrastructure and all that. But it was worth it. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to go anywhere in this industry without being certified, particularly if you're engaging with corporate America.
Very good, thanks. At this point, I have some more questions, but I'm curious if anybody from the audience has questions. If so, I'd be happy to take them. Just raise hands. Nothing at this point. Okay, well, I'll continue, and if any come up, please just raise your hand. So, Chris, is there value in separating ITAD and e-scrap management? How can this impact your customers? And, I think we're here generally talking about, sort of the two sides, the ITAD side, the e-scrap side. Some companies like Sun King do both. What are the what's the value to separating it out, and ultimately how can it impact customers or suppliers?
Yeah, I mean, I think separating it out, again, it adds to the bottom line, right? You're not incurring all the additional costs to sort and manually dismantle or buy a shredder and have to deal with the issues that shredders typically have. We've already done all that, right? So we have that. We have the certifications, or the R2V3. We'll be getting the eStewards that'll make doing business extremely easy across the country, whether you're an ITAD or a recycler. So I think just as Ray mentioned earlier, not touching it as much, right? So let us handle it. We've got our costs down. We know what it takes to shred the product, how we need to have it sorted. removing batteries, any other hazards that are in there. We can do all that for you. You don't need to invest in that. And I think that will maximize the value to your customers, right? And on the flip side, right, we're looking at down the road at potential partnerships and alliances with the ITAD companies. So we can maximize that value. There's no, I mentioned it earlier, there's no point in me having the ITAD piece of it because it's going to be a constant battle. You shouldn't have to fight that battle either on determining whether I need to process it or not, right? Just send it to me. I'll take care of it for you.
Very good. Ray, talk a little bit about the challenges right now in the scrap market. You alluded to, commodities markets going the other way, and I think we're all feeling it a little bit. And same thing, frankly, on the resale side of things, as Mike alluded to. He's made several price changes to his list. But talk a little bit about scrap markets and where they're going, and at what point does it make sense to process versus sell off?
Yeah, so I think the ITAD market suffered first, and we kind of saw that. And just really in the last month, copper and gold markets have really turned and headed south. So there is going to be a challenge, and we feel that challenge is going to continue. It's not going to turn around soon in our mind. There may be others that disagree with that, but right now we think the commodity markets are going to suffer for the probably through the end of the year, and that poses some challenges. Maybe when you used to be getting $2 for a circuit board, $2 a pound for a circuit board, maybe that's going down to $1.50 or $1.25 a pound, and that's going to affect your bottom line. And really churning and burning, as Adam said, that's going to be a big play right now. Because before, when the markets were headed up and everything was unicorns and roses, we all felt great. We could hold on to product, but I think we all really have to look at that and how fast can we process that material, or do we need to look for somebody else who can process that faster so that I can recover some value before it loses even more value. And those are challenges that we're all going to face. I think in the ITAD space with your resale assets, as well as on the commodity side for the scrap products, we're all going to face those together, and we need to work together, partner up, find somebody that you can work with, that you feel comfortable with their downstreams, with their certifications, with the person you're working with, and really try and maximize the value while you have it in your hand.
I just heard Ray say, buy low, hold, and eventually the market will come back and then you sell high. Question.
Don't take my strategy.
Have there been any difficulties around sourcing as the market has changed and fluctuated?
Great question. Mike, let me start with you. Have there been any changes in terms of buying or sourcing material with the changes in the market? Has it become more difficult?
Actually, in the last quarter, it's actually freed up quite a bit. That's actually where the problem with pricing went down so fast. We have a glut. I mean, at the moment, during COVID, things like Chromebooks were tracking well beyond what their depreciated value should have shown. But they were holding up because of supply chain issues and because people wanted low-cost entry product. Even low-end laptops were selling well above what their depreciation schedule and residual schedule showed. That has all ended now, and now there is a glut. There's a lot of organizations that have a surplus of material to sell. So from an acquisition standpoint, everybody drove their prices down when material did come available because the market was dropping down because of demand. So I love the market because it's all about supply and demand, and nothing shows it more than the secondary market. And when we see it, it's exactly at that week, exactly at that day. It's a spot market check. Every day we put out material. So it's a great way of determining what value is and where the market's at, as long as you have a broad enough market that's sampling the market.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, it is really interesting in that a year ago and really two, as COVID started, the resale market was really, really hot, and it's obviously cooled down quite a bit. Commodities have cooled down, and now people are really having to sort of rethink or reinvent the way they're doing things compared to how they were. You know, as Mike alluded to, Chromebooks were really hot. Now it's tough to, you know, to get people to buy them. So, you know, the industry changes, of course, and there's always different obstacles. And as I alluded to earlier, it seems like a perfect storm right now between, you know, the economy and consumer price index and labor rates and all of those things. But it's in times like these that you have to get creative, find new partners, and that's really what this session's about, is finding new partners and trying to hold on and make as much money where you can. And, you know, hopefully for all of us, things get better in the near term. Chris, talking to you a little bit, so I alluded to the fact earlier that FTER is very good at processing some lower grade materials. And with the commodity markets changing, how does that sort of impact your model, and does it make it more difficult for you guys to operate?
No, it's not making it more difficult for us to operate. We're still successful with the business model we have in place. As I mentioned earlier, we've closed that loop, right? So we own the smelter, right? We own the secondary, we own the primary smelter now. So we control our own destiny on the recovery values. So we do our best to get it in the most effective form for those processes. So yeah, I mean, you know, seeing copper and gold dip, it is tough because the low-grade material that we deal with is, you know, we average probably 30 grams per ton of gold. Is typically what we see throughout the year if you take everything we receive. So that's extremely low material that we get from your consumer goods, blenders, vacuums, things like that, all the way up to your motherboards. So yeah, so it's affected our pricing a little bit, but we're still seeing a good amount of volume coming in because, again, people still need to move this material. ITAD companies still need to move the scrap. So we will provide you the value we can based on the market.
Yeah, very good. Ray, what about you guys at URT? Obviously, you guys process some different materials. I know cathode ray tubes, plastic. What are you guys seeing, and how is the downturn affecting what you guys do at URT?
Yeah, so we haven't, and it'll be interesting to see this time next year what the volumes look like and see if there really is some less volume in the market. Right now is typically our busiest time of the year, the summer. So our volumes are still on pace to what they have been historically, and that's, you know, we're not seeing anything right now. Having said that, we have to understand that the market, you know, the copper and the gold markets really have recently just taken that big turn downward. So we haven't seen any changes there as far as inbound volumes go, but it will be interesting to see year over year if that really does affect us, and if there is less material in the market, or maybe people are buying high and selling low, and seeing if they really want to play the market that way. But for plastics is probably the one exception that we really have not seen a downturn in plastics yet, and that's because the oil price is still high due to what's going on over in Europe. So the plastic market has held strong for us. We have our own plastic separation and processing facility in Wisconsin, and that has been very helpful to help support some of our commodity prices. And honestly, right now on the plastics, our biggest problem at URT is that we just don't have the capacity to process enough plastics. There are a lot of plastics out there, and a lot of companies, you know, shipping us plastics and want to use us for our plastics because of our internal process that we have where we do get it down to a reusable pellet. So that's the one exception I would probably point out is the plastics market. And there are a lot, I can't believe how many CRTs are still left out there in people's basements. And we keep seeing those. And I think I told Adam earlier today, last year we processed 13.7 million pounds of CRTs just in our Wisconsin facility. Wow. So there is a lot of CRT material out there still.
Thank God you guys are processing it, because there's so few left. Mike, again, something maybe we touched on a little bit, but right now with the changes in the market, are you guys taking risk on in terms of buying material maybe holding it or thinking that you're buying it and going to move it at a higher number and then come to find out that
Yeah.
the market's collapsed?
Yeah, we don't stock anything. We buy it, we turn it. All of our clients are settled generally within 30 days from the receipt. We get it audited, we get it processed, we get it sold. I'm not into the idea of holding stuff or shipping individual pieces or whatever. I've seen those models, they can work. There's a lot of ITAD guys here that are what we would refer to as vertical players. They're strong at servers, strong at networking, strong at hard drives, strong at components. And certainly in those commodities, you can sit there with inventory and supply the industry. But when you're a wholesale ITAD operation, it's best to turn and burn. So we'll take a position. I actively just bought a couple deals, so routinely we'll take positions. Nice thing is the market has stabilized now. We haven't seen any variation, and actually I'm predicting a slight bounce. As soon as the glut clears through the system, we'll have recovery values to where right now in i5, fourth generation is going below where it should be. If sixth generation is going below where it should be, it should pop up. We chart the residual charts for leasing and rental, so you know what it should track at when it's 6 years old, when it's 5 years old, when it's 4 years old. It was above those numbers for COVID. It's now below those numbers at the moment. It's now coming back. We anticipate it's going to come right back up to where it should have been to begin with.
You heard it here first, folks. Make sure you hold on to those units until it comes back.
Not much, not much. I mean, we're talking about a small bounce.
Okay, all right. If not, you know where to find Mike. Any other audience questions at the moment? Jeff Gloyd, I know you have one, no? Jeff? Oh, okay. Sorry, Jeff. Anybody else? No?
Yeah.
Who's got one? Oh, Craig.
Craig.
Thanks, Craig. Can always count on you.
So you mentioned, being diligent about catching players that might be gaming the system. When we go do an audit, it's probably not reasonable for my guy to ask you for every DOL you've had for the last 10 years. What are reasonable expectations that your folks would have when an iPad like us comes in to do an audit? What are reasonable things? Hopefully we catch the gaming system, but aren't, out of bounds from work.
Yeah, so Craig mentioned this, so I'm going to no comment. Thanks for the question, though. No, I think it's reasonable that when you go in to do, whether it's an internal audit or you have a third party auditing somebody, it's reasonable to ask and to show proof of the amount of material that you shipped to that company at a minimum. Where did it go? I don't want to tell anybody out here how to do their audits, but I think it's reasonable to require them to show, I shipped you 10 loads of CRTs in the last quarter, for example. Show me where those 10 loads went. And if somebody's gaming the system, you're gonna find out real quick, because they'll be able to produce maybe 1 or 2 BOLs, but they're not going to be able to produce 10.
Yeah, and that brings up another good point. You touched on a little bit earlier, Mike, where you talked about R2v3 and how, as part of the R2v3 certification, you only need to go down to R2 and you don't need to go up beyond. But do you generally think that's safe, or do you think people should still want to know more about what's happening downstream?
Honestly, the best thing you could do is what you're doing right now. Being part of an industry association, being like ISRI, being part of ITAD Summit, being part of BrokerBen, you're learning the guys that are out there that do it right. I mean, frankly, if you're here, chances are you're doing it right, or at least you have the intent of doing it right. This is the best networking place there is to find out, is that guy good? Is that guy good? And there's no better than this crew to tell you whether or not that partner is a good partner. And really, it's reputation. The only thing you've got to live on is reputation. Certifications are great, but at the end of the day, do you do it right? Do you do it fair? Do you give a good value and service? What is your reputation in the industry? That's everything. And frankly, these kind of forums are the best way to determine that through the networking that you're doing.
I think, can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
I think going back to Craig and what Mike said too, if you visit your downstream and maybe even unannounced, you're going to be able to tell right away if what they're doing is what they say they're doing.
Exactly.
Anything to add, Chris?
Yeah, no, I mean, just to touch on that as well. I mean, yeah, I mean, you definitely want to see the operation running, right? You want to see people moving. You want to hear if they have a shredder, it should be running. You know, things like that. Adding to, you know, I always would drive around to the back of recyclers' facilities just to see what they're doing back there, right? Do they have a big trash pile? Is there-
Container.
Yeah. Do they, you know, how many trucks do they have out there? Okay, well, let me just see one of those trucks. Let me see what's in those trucks, right? You know, and see if there's just, if it's filled with, you know, old CRTs with a bunch of dust on them that have been sitting there for 2 years, right? So, yeah, just make sure everything's running, right? If you want to see BOLs from us, yeah, just ask. All day long. You know, the whole gaming the system, you know, it was, everybody always had that one BOL, right, that they showed for every audit. Every audit, here it is, here it is. And now I think R2V3 and E-Stewards both have done a better job of eliminating the one BOL thing. So, yeah, and that's, with Evterra, being able to control some of the downstream pieces of it helps as well. So, you know we're sending our stuff because we own it all. We need to send it to our smelters. We need to feed them. So, yeah, that's just what I'll add.
Please, question in the front.
So, you know, R2V3 is their standard, E-Stewards is updated their standards. I mean, all you all are certified. You know, how much value do you place on certification and the status of what their certification status is?
Yeah, so the question was that we're all certified. How much value do we place on the certification? I will say, for me, a tremendous amount. If for nothing, no other reason than it shows our employees that we care and we're trying to do things the right way. But also, obviously, that extends to suppliers, and it really says that we're interested in reinvesting in our business and doing things the right way. You know, there's obviously education that goes along with that to educate our customers on what E-Stewards or R2 is and why it's important. It makes it more difficult to compete on price from somebody that's not certified because they might not be doing the right thing, but I'd rather be certified and above board and doing things the right way and selling on that basis. And so for us at Sun King, it's been hugely beneficial. And really, it's taken us from, I think, you know, a small local player to more of a regional player because we are doing things the right way. It has taught us about doing some stuff the right way, and it's introduced us to new people, and it's held us accountable. And for those reasons, I think it's critically important. But I'll defer to the rest of you as well, Chris.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, you know, we have the one facility in Atlanta that's R2V3 already, as we're standing up 3 other facilities, the 3 other facilities will get E-Stewards certified first before the R2V3. But we'll eventually, you know, in the next 12 months, all of our facilities will be dual certified. So, you know, and that's, a lot of it is because, yes, we want to do the right thing. We want to, customers are asking as well, right? You know, especially in the ITAD world, doing business, if I don't have R2V3 and you do, it's going to be extremely difficult, a lot of paperwork to go through in order for you to get me approved as a downstream. So I want to make it as simple as possible for you guys. I don't like any of that paperwork stuff, but it's challenging if you're not certified.
Yeah, and I would just add real quick is that it's a big commitment to be certified. Obviously, we have a full-time employee that does nothing but make sure that all of our paperwork and our downstream is compliant and up to par, and beyond him, it's a whole team. But you know, we have one individual that does nothing but make sure that we're adhering to the standard. Ray, what about you guys at URT?
Yeah, so same thing. We obviously value the certification. We're E-Stewards, and we're in the process of getting the R2V3 certification because it does bring value, and we understand that. Both certifications for different reasons in our mind, but the certification process and the certifications themselves add value and do give your clients primarily a nice little warm, fuzzy feeling. Hopefully, they are doing their downstream due diligence as well, but the certification definitely goes a long ways and makes that process a little easier for them.
Mike?
We're definitely the smallest company up here. We only have a few employees. It was a big bite to take that on as a project, not only from a cost standpoint, but from a dedication of hours standpoint. Probably 1,000 hours. It was worth it, though. From a standpoint, it's the cost of entry. At the end of the day, we want to be a credible organization, not only from our experience, but from our credentials. And without those credentials, we don't have the opportunity to talk to a Fortune 500 company. We don't have an opportunity to talk to any of these guys, and we wouldn't have the opportunity to talk to anybody out in this show. It gives you credibility beyond just your experience. It gives you the fact that you've already been vetted. You know you have processes that are world-class, and we can compete.
Other questions from the audience? Okay. So we've only got a couple minutes left. So one of the things that I want to talk about, I started talking about ISRI. I just want to give a little plug to ISRI. So a lot of people think that ISRI is only focused on recycling, and the reality is that all of the gentlemen up here are ISRI members. We are focused on reuse, right to repair, and other topics as well. We have, as part of the electronics division of ISRI, a call every 2 weeks, and all of you that are interested can go to the ISRI booth and sign up to be part of a call, even though generally it's for members only. And we're going to talk about the Basel Convention and some of the new stuff that came out of Basel. We're going to talk about forecast for the business. We're going to talk about first sale doctrine, right to repair, and other things. And we're really focused on not just recycling, but resale when it comes to e-scrap as well. So I want to thank my panelists. Thank you, Chris, Ray, Mike, and appreciate everybody listening today. I hope everybody has a good rest of the show, and enjoy.